If you're a Xennial, you may have noticed something subtle about the way you move through life. You can fit into almost any room, understand almost any perspective, and translate almost any cultural reference. And yet, when you're alone, there can be a quiet question that doesn't always have words. Not "who am I" in a dramatic way, more like which version of me is the real one. You can feel solid and adaptable at the same time, but also strangely unanchored, as if your identity was built in motion. Transitional identity is what happens when the rules for being a person change while you're still learning them. It's not just about being between generations. It's about being shaped by two different systems of meaning. One system taught you that privacy is normal, that adulthood is a clear role, and that you earn respect by being steady. The other system taught you that visibility is expected, that adulthood is flexible, and that you earn value by staying current. Research shows that identity forms through repeated feedback from the environment. When the environment shifts fast, the feedback becomes mixed, and mixed feedback creates mixed internal maps. Xennials often grew up with a slower social rhythm and then matured inside a faster one. You learned how to be reachable without growing up expecting to be reachable. You learned how to curate without being raised to curate. You learned how to speak in modern emotional language without always having had it modeled early. Studies suggest that when people have to adapt to changing cultural norms, they develop strong cognitive flexibility. But that same flexibility can make self-definition feel more contextual. You might feel like you become the version of yourself that matches the setting, and only later realize you've been switching without noticing. This isn't fake. It's a nervous system strategy. Psychological studies indicate that the brain prioritizes social safety, and social safety often comes from matching the environment. In a world that changed from private to public, from slow to fast, from local to constantly connected, matching became a skill. You learned how to blend in, how to update your tone, how to understand different values without openly declaring allegiance to one. That can make you socially intelligent. It can also make identity feel like a collection of adaptations rather than a single stable center. Transitional identity also shows up in how you experience attention. You remember what it felt like to be bored and let boredom pass. You also learn to live in a world where boredom is immediately solved. Researchers have found that attention patterns are shaped by the stimulation environment. When your baseline formed in quieter conditions and then the world became louder, your mind can feel split. One part of you craves depth, the other part stays ready for interruption. You might be capable of focus, but feel mentally open all the time, like your attention never fully closes the door. This can affect emotional regulation too. Xennials often learned early emotional restraint, then later learned emotional awareness. So you may understand feelings clearly, but still feel uncomfortable performing them. You may know how to name what's happening inside, while also preferring to process it privately. Research shows that emotional expression norms are learned, and when norms shift across your lifetime, you can end up with two internal rules. One says, "Don't make it a big thing." The other says, "If you don't name it, it stays stuck." Living with both rules can create an odd inner tension where you're aware of emotions, but not always sure what to do with that awareness. Transitional identity often becomes most visible in relationships. You may value loyalty and low-drama closeness, but also feel pressure to communicate constantly because that's what modern connection can look like. You may want intimacy, but feel your nervous system tighten when closeness becomes constant access. Studies suggest that people differ in the amount of social stimulation that feels regulating. If you grew up with more independence and fewer digital demands, your system may feel safest with space. And yet you live in a culture that sometimes interprets space as distance. That mismatch can make you feel misunderstood even when you're present and caring. Work and self-image can carry the same split. Xennials often absorbed older ideas about competence and responsibility, then entered a world where work is also identity, meaning, and personal branding. Research shows that when people link self-worth to performance, they can become high-functioning in a way that looks stable but feels heavy. Xennials may be practical enough to know that life isn't a performance, while still feeling the invisible pressure to keep up with the performance culture around them. That's transitional identity again, knowing the system is loud, yet still feeling its volume in your body. Over time, this can create a specific internal consequence: identity fatigue. Not burnout from doing too much, but fatigue from constant adjusting. You may feel tired after social events even when they went well because your mind was subtly calibrating. You may feel drained after being online, not because you're fragile, but because visibility pulls attention outward. You may notice that you're good at supporting others, yet less practiced at letting your own preferences take up space. Researchers have found that when people habitually adapt, they can lose contact with smaller signals like desire, rest needs, and personal pacing, because adaptation becomes automatic. But transitional identity is not only a problem. It can also create a rare kind of range. You can understand different value systems without turning one into a rigid identity. You can recognize what was gained and what was lost as culture changed, without needing to romanticize either side. Psychological studies indicate that exposure to multiple norms can increase perspective-taking, nuance, and tolerance for ambiguity. Xennials often carry that quietly. You may not be the loudest in the room, but you often see the whole room. And maybe that's the calmer reframe. Feeling caught in the middle doesn't always mean you're behind or unfinished. It can mean your identity formed in a transitional climate, so it learned to stay flexible. Your mind learned how to hold two realities at once: privacy and visibility, patience and speed, self-reliance and emotional awareness. That can feel like a split, but it can also be a kind of psychological bilingualism. You're fluent in more than one way of living, and fluency takes energy. If this felt familiar, you can like the video, subscribe, and share it with someone who's always felt shaped by two different worlds.